The captain's voice crackled through the speakers, cutting through the tense silence like a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a serious incident involving passenger assault, this flight is being diverted immediately. Every head turned, every breath held. In seat 12A, Brenda Whitmore froze, her face draining of all color, as 200 pairs of eyes found her. Behind her, baby Elijah whimpered in his mother's trembling arms, a red mark blooming on his tiny leg. Nobody knew it yet, but this single moment would shatter lives, expose buried hatred, and force an entire nation to confront an uncomfortable truth. Before we dive into this shocking story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you believe every child deserves protection regardless of their skin color, hit that like button right now. And make sure to subscribe because you won't believe what happens when the police board this plane. Now, let's rewind and see how we got here. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Atlanta's Hartsfield Jackson Airport as Naomi Fletcher rushed through the crowded terminal. Her 10-month-old son Elijah balanced on one hip, a diaper bag threatening to slide off her shoulder. She had exactly 40 minutes to make her flight to Chicago. 40 minutes to get through security, find her gate, and somehow keep her exhausted, teething baby calm enough not to disturb the judgmental glances already following her every move. Naomi was 28 years old, a pediatric nurse who knew every trick in the book for soothing cranky infants. But knowing and doing were two different things when your own child was suffering and you were running on 3 hours of sleep. The call had come at 2 in the morning. Her older sister's voice, shaking with panic. "Mama had a stroke. You need to come home. Now." Home. Chicago. The place Naomi had left 6 years ago with nothing but a backpack and a dream of building a better life. Shed worked double shifts, put herself through nursing school, and built a stable, independent existence in Atlanta. Shed planned to go back eventually, to show her mama that Shed made it. But not like this. Never like this. At the check-in counter, the airline employee barely looked up from her screen. "Boarding pass and ID, please." Her tone was automatic, mechanical, until Elijah let out a wail that seemed to pierce the entire terminal. The woman's eyes flickered with annoyance. "Ma'am, you'll need to keep your child quiet during the flight." Naomi wanted to scream. She wanted to explain that her baby was in pain, that molars were pushing through tender gums, that she was doing everything she could. Instead, she smiled tightly and said, "I'll do my best." Because that was what black mothers learn to do. Apologize for existing. Apologize for their children existing. Make themselves smaller, quieter, less threatening. The security line felt endless. Elijah squirmed and cried while Naomi fumbled with her shoes, her laptop, the bag of breast milk that required extra screening. A white woman behind her muttered to her companion, "Some people just shouldn't travel with babies." Naomi pretended not to hear, though each word landed like a small cut. By the time she reached gate B17, her arms ached and her heart hammered with anxiety. The gate agent announced boarding, and Naomi joined the line, gently bouncing Elijah and humming a soft lullaby her own mama used to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The plane was a standard narrow body, 3 seats on each side of a single aisle. Naomi's ticket put her in seat 12F, the window seat. At least she'd be able to lean against the wall, create a small cocoon of privacy for her and Elijah. She made her way down the aisle, apologizing as her diaper bag bumped against seats, feeling the weight of stairs following her progress. Seat 12F. She collapsed into it with relief, immediately working to organize her supplies. Bottle within reach, pacifier clipped to her shirt, teething toy ready in the seat pocket, Elijah's favorite blanket spread across her lap. She had a system. a routine designed to maximize the chance of a peaceful flight. She just needed everything to go according to plan. But as she settled in, she noticed the woman in seat 12A, across the row and one seat up. The woman had already claimed the aisle seat, her designer purse placed deliberately on the middle seat as if to discourage anyone from sitting there. She wore an expensive navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek bun, diamond studs glinting in her ears. Everything about her screamed wealth, privilege, and the absolute certainty that the world should bend to her convenience. Brenda Whitmore had just closed a 7-figure real estate deal. She was flying to Chicago for another high-stakes meeting, mentally rehearsing her presentation, already irritated by the delay at the gate. When she'd seen the young black woman with a baby boarding the plane, her jaw had tightened. When she realized they'd be in the same row, she'd actually considered asking to change seats, but the flight was full, and making a scene would be undignified. As Elijah let out another cry, Brenda's eyes cut sharply toward Naomi. The look lasted only a second, but Naomi felt it like a physical touch, disgust, contempt, the kind of look that said, "You don't belong here. You're disturbing my peace." Naomi turned her face to the window, blinking back tears. She began to nurse Elijah, hoping the familiar comfort would soothe him. For a moment, it worked. His little body relaxed, his cries subsiding to soft gulps and sighs. Maybe, just maybe, this would be okay. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Brenda put in noise-canceling headphones and opened her laptop, making a show of being too busy and important to be bothered by the chaos of ordinary travelers. She pulled out a small bottle of designer perfume and spritzed it around her seat, as if trying to create a sanitized bubble between herself and the rest of the cabin. Naomi noticed. Of course she noticed. But she said nothing, just held her baby closer and prayed for the strength to endure the next 2 hours. The plane taxied toward the runway, engines rumbling to life. Inside the cabin, the recycled air carried a mixture of cologne, coffee, and the faint smell of anxiety that always seemed to permeate flights. Naomi kept Elijah latched, hoping the pressure change during takeoff wouldn't hurt his sensitive ears. She'd read all the articles, talked to other mothers, prepared as best she could, but theory and practice were different when your child was suffering. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Elijah pulled away from nursing and began to scream. Not fuss, not whimper, scream. The kind of full-lunged, desperate cry that every parent dreads and every non-parent judges. His little face turned red, tears streaming down his cheeks, his body rigid with discomfort as the cabin pressure changed and his congested ears protested. Naomi felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward her. "Shh, baby, shh," she whispered, rocking him, trying the pacifier, trying everything. "I know it hurts, I know, Mama's here." But Elijah was beyond comfort. The pain in his ears combined with the pain in his gums created a perfect storm of infant misery. Across the aisle, Brenda removed her headphones with exaggerated slowness. Her expression could have frozen fire. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clear and sharp over the engine noise. "Can you please control your child?" Naomi looked up, exhausted and desperate. "I'm sorry." His teething and the pressure change hurts his ears. "I'm doing everything I can." "I don't care about excuses," Brenda said coldly. "This is unacceptable. People paid good money for these seats. We're trying to relax, and your inability to manage your child is disturbing everyone." Heat flooded Naomi's cheeks. Around them, other passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked sympathetic, others looked annoyed. A middle-aged white man 2 rows back muttered, "For God's sake." Naomi wanted to defend herself, to explain that babies cry because they can't communicate any other way, that she was a good mother doing her absolute best in an impossible situation. But the words stuck in her throat because she'd learned long ago that black women who spoke up were labeled aggressive. So she just nodded, turned back to Elijah, and fought to hold back her own tears. Brenda clicked her tongue and pressed the call button. A flight attendant appeared within moments, a young white man with neatly combed hair and a practiced smile. His name tag read, Chad. "Yes, ma'am, how can I help you?" Chad asked Brenda, his tone warm and accommodating. "This woman's baby has been screaming since we boarded," Brenda said, gesturing toward Naomi without looking at her. "Can you do something about this situation? It's completely disruptive." Chad turned to Naomi, and his smile cooled several degrees. "Mom, you need to keep your baby quiet. Other passengers are complaining." "I'm trying," Naomi said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Hess in pain. I'm doing everything I can." "Well, try harder," Chad said, with zero empathy in his voice. "This is a shared space. You need to be considerate of others." Naomi felt something crack inside her chest. The unfairness of it all, the double standard, the complete lack of compassion crashed over her. But she just nodded again, because what choice did she have? Make a scene and become the aggressive black woman? Create more attention and more judgment? Chad walked away, and Brenda replaced her headphones with a satisfied smirk. She'd made her point. Put that woman in her place. Reminded everyone who deserved respect and who didn't. For the next hour, Naomi existed in a special kind of hell. Elijah would calm for 5 minutes, then start crying again. Each time, Naomi felt the pressure building around her. The silent accusations, the unspoken belief that she was a bad mother, that she shouldn't be on this plane, that her presence was an imposition on everyone else's comfort. Brenda kept up a steady stream of loud sighs, pointed glances, and muttered comments just loud enough for Naomi to hear. Ridiculous, typical, some people have no consideration. Each word was a tiny dart, designed to wound. A black woman in her 60s, sitting in the row directly behind Brenda, finally had enough. Miss Ruby had raised 4 children of her own, had weathered decades of discrimination, and she recognized exactly what was happening here. She leaned forward and tapped Brenda's shoulder. "Excuse me, young lady," Miss Ruby said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned every gray hair. "That mother is doing her best. Instead of complaining, maybe you could try showing some compassion." Brenda whirled around, her face flushing with anger. "Mind your own business. I have every right to a peaceful flight, and that baby has every right to exist." Miss Ruby shot back. "Hess in pain. Hess not crying to annoy you. Show some humanity." "Oh, please," Brenda snapped. "Don't make this about race." "Honey, you made it about race the moment you looked at that young mother like she was dirt on your shoe," Miss Ruby said. "I've seen your kind my whole life. You think you're better than everyone else, especially us." Other passengers began to pay attention. Some pulled out their phones. The tension in the cabin ratcheted up another notch, the air thick with conflict that had been brewing since the moment the plane took off. Chad returned, looking flustered. "Ladies, please keep your voices down. We can't have disruptions." "Then tell her to stop harassing a mother with a sick baby," Miss Ruby said, pointing at Brenda. "I'm not harassing anyone," Brenda protested. "I simply asked for what I paid for, which is a comfortable flight." "Is that too much to expect?" Naomi sat frozen in her seat, Elijah finally dozing fitfully against her chest. She wanted to disappear. She wanted this nightmare to end. She wanted to be anywhere but here, trapped at 30,000 feet, with people who looked at her son and saw an inconvenience instead of a suffering child. But the worst was yet to come. After nearly 2 hours of turbulent tension, a blessed silence finally descended over row 12. Elijah, exhausted from crying and pain, had surrendered to sleep in his mother's arms. Naomi held him carefully, hardly daring to breathe, terrified that the slightest movement would wake him and restart the cycle of tears and judgment. Her arms ached from holding his 10-month-old weight in the same position for so long, but she didn't care. This peace, however fragile, was worth any physical discomfort. She allowed herself to close her eyes, just for a moment. The stress of the past 24 hours crashed over her. The midnight phone call, the frantic packing, the expensive last-minute flight, the worry about her mama lying in a hospital bed 2 states away. Add to that the humiliation of the past 2 hours, and Naomi felt hollowed out, empty of everything except the need to hold her baby and survive until landing. The cabin lights had been dimmed for the remainder of the flight. Most passengers dozed or watched their seatback screens, grateful for the return to relative quiet. Even Brenda had stopped her commentary, focusing instead on the spreadsheet open on her laptop, though her jaw remained tight with residual annoyance. Naomi's head drooped to the side. Her grip on Elijah relaxed slightly as sleep began to claim her. Elijah shifted in her lap, his little legs stretching out in that boneless way sleeping babies have. His left foot slipped down between the gap where Naomi's seat met the window, dangling into the space below. Brenda glanced over and saw the tiny foot, encased in a blue sock with little elephants on it, resting near the metal bracket of her seat. Her eyes narrowed. That baby's foot was in her space, technically touching her seat structure. Another violation of her personal bubble by this inconsiderate woman and her child. She looked around carefully. Chad and the other flight attendants were in the galley. Most passengers had their eyes closed or were absorbed in their entertainment. Miss Ruby behind her had put on a sleeping mask. The aisle was clear. Brenda's rational mind whispered a warning. Don't do it. Hez just a baby. Walk away. Call the flight attendant. But Brenda's rational mind had been drowned out by 2 hours of resentment, by years of entitlement, by a deep-seated prejudice shed never examined or challenged. In her warped thinking, this wasn't about hurting a child. This was about teaching a lesson, about putting people in their place, about making sure they understood that they couldn't just inconvenience her without consequences. She pulled her leg back and, with deliberate force, kicked Elijah's small foot. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Elijah woke with a shriek of pain and terror that cut through the cabin like a siren. Naomi jerked awake, her heart hammering, her hands immediately checking her son. What? What happened? Baby, what's wrong? Elijah's screams reached a pitch that spoke of real pain, not just discomfort. Naomi looked down and saw the red mark already forming on his shin. Saw the way he pulled his leg up protectively. Her eyes shot to Brenda. What did you do? Naomi's voice shook. What did you do to my baby? Brenda's face was a mask of cold indifference. Your child was kicking me. I simply moved his foot away from my seat. He wasn't kicking you. Hez asleep. You kicked him. Naomi's voice rose. All thoughts of staying quiet and not making a scene evaporated in the face of her child's pain. You kicked a baby. Don't be dramatic, Brenda said dismissively. I barely touched him. Maybe if you'd kept him under control, this wouldn't have happened. Passengers around them began to stir, pulling out earbuds, turning in their seats. Miss Ruby yanked off her sleeping mask and leaned forward. What's going on? She kicked my baby, Naomi cried, tears streaming down her face as she examined Elijah's leg. The red mark was darkening to purple, clear evidence of deliberate force. She kicked my son. I did no such thing, Brenda said, but her voice wavered slightly. The child was encroaching on my space. I saw it. A voice called out. A young white man across the aisle, a college student named Trevor, held up his phone. I saw the whole thing, and I recorded it. The cabin erupted. Passengers who'd been pretending to sleep sat up. Those who'd been watching movies paused their screens. Everyone wanted to see what was happening in row 12. "Let me see that video," Miss Ruby demanded. Trevor turned his phone screen toward her. The video was clear, damning. It showed Brenda deliberately looking around, making sure no one was watching, then pulling her leg back and kicking forcefully at the baby's foot. There was no mistaking the intentional nature of the act. "Sweet Jesus," Miss Ruby breathed. "That woman assaulted a baby." "I did not," Brenda protested, her voice rising. "That video is taken out of context. The baby was bothering me for hours." "So you thought you'd hurt him," Trevor said incredulously. "What kind of person kicks a baby?" Other passengers began to shout. "That's child abuse. Someone call the flight attendant. She should be arrested." Chad appeared, looking overwhelmed. "What's happening? Everyone needs to calm down. That woman kicked this baby." Miss Ruby pointed at Brenda. "There's video evidence. She needs to be restrained." Brenda stood up, her face flushed with anger, and something that might have been fear. "This is insane. I did not kick anyone. That woman is lying to get attention, and you're all falling for it." "Mom, sit down," Chad said, but his eyes were uncertain, flicking between Brenda and Naomi, clearly not sure who to believe. "I want to see the video," another flight attendant said, pushing through the growing crowd. This was Linda, the head flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Trevor handed her his phone. Linda watched the video once, then watched it again. Her expression hardened. "Mom," she said to Brenda, "you need to sit down immediately. Do not speak to anyone. Do not move." "I want to speak to your supervisor," Brenda said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "I'll sue this airline. I'll sue all of you. You can't treat me like this." "You assaulted a child," Linda said flatly. "I'm informing the captain immediately. This flight is about to get very interesting for you." She pulled out the internal phone and made a call to the cockpit. The cabin buzzed with conversation, with passengers pulling out their own phones to record, to text, to post on social media. Naomi sat in her seat, rocking Elijah, her whole body shaking. She felt Miss Ruby's hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "It's going to be okay, baby," Miss Ruby whispered. "Justice is coming." In the cockpit, Captain Jerome Mitchell listened to Linda's report, his jaw tightening with each word. Had been flying for 30 years. Had handled medical emergencies, mechanical failures, and unruly passengers. But an adult deliberately assaulting an infant? That was a new low, and he knew exactly what he had to do. The video had already begun its journey beyond the confines of the aircraft. Trevor had texted it to his girlfriend before Linda had even finished watching it the first time. She had immediately posted it on social media with the caption, "White woman kicks black baby on flight. This is horrific." Within minutes, it had started spreading like wildfire, shared by thousands of outraged viewers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. But inside the plane, the immediate focus remained on row 12, where Brenda Whitmore's carefully constructed facade had begun to crumble. Linda had insisted that Chad bring her the first aid kit so they could document Elijah's injury. The bruise on his shin was darkening rapidly, clear evidence of blunt force trauma on delicate 10-month-old skin. "I need to photograph this for our report," Linda said gently to Naomi. "Is that all right?" Naomi nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She held Elijah's leg steady, while Linda took several pictures from different angles, making sure the injury was clearly documented. Other passengers leaned in, taking their own photos and videos, creating a comprehensive record that would be impossible to dispute. Meanwhile, another passenger had made a connection that would prove devastating to Brenda's defense. Kendra Washington, A 26-year-old attorney sitting 2 rows behind the incident had been scrolling through her phone when recognition struck. She'd seen that face before. Those sharp features, that blonde hair. Wait a minute. Kendra said loudly enough for people around her to hear. I know who that woman is. Several heads turned toward her. Kendra stood up, holding her phone high so others could see the screen. That's Brenda Whitmore. She owns Whitmore Properties, a real estate company in Atlanta. So what? Someone said. So, 3 years ago, her company was sued for housing discrimination. Kendra explained, her voice carrying through the now silent cabin. There were emails leaked where she referred to black prospective tenants as undesirable elements and a risk to property values. The case settled out of court, but the evidence was damning. She has a history of racism. The cabin exploded with reaction. Passengers who'd been giving Brenda the benefit of the doubt now looked at her with undisguised disgust. Those who'd already been outraged felt vindicated in their anger. Brenda's face went from red to white in seconds. That's a completely different matter. That was a business decision based on credit scores and references, not race. The media twisted everything. The emails were pretty clear, Kendra said coldly. You wrote, and I quote, "We need to maintain certain standards in our properties. I don't care what the law says about discrimination. We know what kind of people cause problems. Would you like me to pull up more of your greatest hits?" This is harassment, Brenda cried, looking around desperately for support. You can't just attack me like this based on out-of-context quotes from years ago. But before anyone could respond, a voice cut through the noise like a blade. Attention, all passengers. This is Captain Mitchell speaking. The cabin fell instantly silent. Everyone stopped arguing, stopped recording, stopped moving. When the captain spoke with that tone, you listened. Now, before we continue with this story, I need to ask you something. Do you think Captain Mitchell made the right call in what he's about to do? Comment the number 1 if you believe people who hurt children should face immediate consequences, no matter what. And if you think racism has no place in our society, hit that like button hard. Make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. What do you think the captain's about to do? Could his decision change everything? Captain Jerome Mitchell had been flying commercial aircraft for 3 decades. He'd guided planes through violent storms, navigated mechanical emergencies, and talked down panic-stricken first officers. He'd seen the best and worst of human nature at 30,000 feet. But in all those years, nothing had prepared him for the cold fury he felt listening to Linda describe what had happened in row 12. As an African-American man who'd fought tooth and nail to earn his captain's wings in an industry that had tried to tell him he didn't belong, Jerome understood prejudice intimately. He understood the casual cruelty of people who thought their comfort mattered more than someone else's humanity. And he understood that sometimes you had to make hard decisions to send a clear message. He'd asked Linda to send the video to his tablet. He watched it 3 times, his jaw tightening with each viewing. There was no ambiguity here. No gray area. A grown woman had deliberately, with full intent, kicked a baby because she deemed him an inconvenience. And that baby happened to be black. The woman happened to have a documented history of racism. This wasn't just assault. This was hate. His co-pilot, a younger white man named First Officer Riley, watched over his shoulder. My God, Riley breathed. Is that real? Unfortunately, yes, Jerome said. He made a decision in that moment that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Riley, contact Street Lewis Air Traffic Control. Tell them we need priority landing for a law enforcement matter. We're diverting. Riley's eyes widened. Diverting? Captain, we're only 40 minutes from Chicago. I'm aware, Jerome said, but I won't have a child abuser on my aircraft for 1 more minute than necessary. We're landing in St. Louis. Contact the FAA and have them arrange for police to meet us on the ground. The passengers are going to be upset about the delay," Riley warned. Jerome turned to face his co-pilot fully, his expression harder than steel. "Then, they'll be upset. But they'll also learn that on my plane, when you assault a baby, there are immediate consequences. No debates, no waiting until we reach our destination. Immediate consequences." He picked up the PA microphone, took a breath, and delivered the announcement that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell speaking. I need your attention for an important announcement." His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of iron will. "We have experienced a serious incident on board this aircraft. A passenger has physically assaulted an infant child." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Even though most passengers already knew something was wrong, hearing it from the captain made it official, made it real. "I want to be crystal clear about something," Jerome continued. "On my aircraft, every passenger is equal. Every passenger deserves respect and safety, regardless of their age, race, religion, or any other characteristic. An infant cannot defend himself. An infant cannot speak for himself. So I will speak for him." In the cabin, Naomi clutched Elijah tighter, tears streaming down her face. Miss Ruby's hand found hers and squeezed. "I have reviewed video evidence of this assault," Jerome said, his voice hardening. "It is unambiguous and damning. Therefore, I am exercising my authority as captain to divert this flight. We will be landing in St. Louis, Missouri, in approximately 20 minutes, where law enforcement will board this aircraft to remove the offending passenger." Brenda made a small choking sound. Her hands gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I understand this will inconvenience many of you," Jerome continued. "The airline will make arrangements for your continued travel. But I will not allow this flight to proceed with someone who has demonstrated violent behavior toward a child. This is not negotiable. This is not up for debate. This is final." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that came from decades of fighting to be seen as equal. "Some people seem to believe that their comfort, their convenience, their personal space is more important than the humanity of others. That their frustration justifies cruelty. That a baby crying in pain deserves punishment rather than compassion. I am here to tell you that belief is wrong. It has always been wrong. And on my watch, it will have consequences." He hung up the microphone. In the cabin below, several passengers erupted in applause. Others pulled out their phones, recording reactions, texting loved ones, posting on social media. The story was going viral in real time. Brenda sat frozen in seat 12A, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. She was Brenda Whitmore. She owned a multi-million-dollar company. She had lawyers. She had connections. They couldn't just divert an entire plane because of her. It was insane, disproportionate, unfair. But even as she thought it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered the truth she didn't want to hear. "You kicked a baby. What did you think would happen?" Linda approached her seat, flanked by 2 other flight attendants. "Ma'am, you need to remain seated with your seatbelt fastened. Do not attempt to use the restroom. Do not attempt to move about the cabin. Do not attempt to communicate with other passengers. Do you understand?" "I want to call my lawyer," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "You'll have the opportunity to make that call when we land," Linda said firmly. "Until then, you sit still and you stay quiet." "This is ridiculous." Brenda tried one more time. "The airline is going to face a massive lawsuit for this. You're humiliating me in front of everyone based on a video that's been taken out of context." Trevor, still sitting across the aisle, couldn't stay silent. "Lady, I recorded that video. There is no context that makes kicking a baby okay. None. Other passengers echoed his sentiment. You should be ashamed of yourself. That poor baby. I hope they throw the book at you. Brenda sank lower in her seat, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her purse. Texts, calls, notifications. The video had reached her staff, her clients, her family. Her carefully curated life was unraveling at supersonic speed. On the flight deck, Jerome and Riley worked through the logistics of their unexpected diversion. Air traffic control was accommodating, clearing a path for them to land as quickly as safely possible. The tower supervisor in Street, Louis, had already contacted the airport police, who were coordinating with Child Protective Services and the FBI, since federal law gave them jurisdiction over crimes committed on aircraft. 10 minutes to landing, Riley announced. Jerome nodded, keeping his focus on the approach. But a part of his mind was already in the cabin, thinking about that young mother and her baby, thinking about all the times he'd seen black mothers judged more harshly, held to impossible standards, treated like their children were burdens instead of blessings. Thinking about his own mother, who'd raised 3 boys while working 2 jobs and enduring the constant microaggressions of being black in America. This was for her, for Naomi, for Elijah, for every parent who'd ever been made to feel like they and their children didn't deserve to take up space in the world. The plane began its descent towards Street Louis. Through the windows, passengers could see the city spreading out below, the gateway arch glinting in the afternoon sun. In any other circumstance, it would have been beautiful, but today, it was the sight of a reckoning. The landing was smooth despite the tension thrumming through every passenger's nerves. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Captain Mitchell's voice came over the PA one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed in Street Louis. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until law enforcement has boarded and the situation has been resolved. I know many of you have connecting flights and other obligations. The airline will have representatives at the gate to assist you with rebooking. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Through the small windows in the cockpit door, passengers could see police vehicles flanking the aircraft, their lights flashing blue and red. An ambulance stood by as well. Standard procedure when a child's welfare was involved. The jetway connected with a hollow thunk. Then, silence. Every eye in the cabin turned toward the forward door. Linda stood ready to open it, her expression professional, but her eyes bright with satisfaction. She'd been in this industry long enough to see plenty of bad behavior go unpunished. Not today. The door opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped on board. Officer Davis, a tall black man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense bearing, and Officer Martinez, a shorter Hispanic woman whose compact frame radiated competence. Good afternoon, Officer Davis said, his voice carrying authority without aggression. We're looking for Brenda Whitmore. Linda pointed toward row 12. Right there, officers. Every head turned. Phones came out again. This was the moment people had been waiting for, the moment where actions had consequences, where privilege couldn't shield you from accountability. Officer Davis and Officer Martinez made their way down the aisle. Passengers shifted in their seats, making room, their faces a mixture of anger, satisfaction, and curiosity. When the officers reached row 12, they stopped. "Mom, are you Brenda Whitmore?" Officer Davis asked. Brenda looked up at him, and for the first time, the reality of her situation seemed to truly hit her. Her face crumpled. "Yes, but I didn't do anything wrong. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. We need you to come with us." "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said, "we have reports of an assault on a minor. I barely touched him." Brenda's voice rose in pitch, desperation creeping in. "He was kicking me for hours. I just moved his foot. It was self-defense. A 10-month-old baby kicked you, so you kicked him back, and you're calling that self-defense." Officer Martinez's eyebrow arched. Mom, please stand up and come with us. I have rights, Brenda said. But she was crying now. Her mascara running. Her perfect composure shattered. I want my lawyer. I want to call my husband. You'll have the opportunity to make calls from the station, Officer Davis said. His voice was patient but firm. Right now, you need to come with us. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Brenda looked around desperately, as if someone might intervene, might stand up for her, might say this had all gone too far. But she met only hard stares and expressions of disgust. Even the passengers who had initially been annoyed by Elijah's crying now looked at her like she was something they'd scrape off their shoes. Mom, hands, where I can see them, Officer Martinez said, pulling out handcuffs. You're not going to cuff me, Brenda gasped. I'm not a criminal. I'm a businesswoman. I own a company. And you assaulted a child, Officer Davis said quietly. So yes, you're going to be handcuffed. Stand up, please. Now. With shaking legs, Brenda stood. Officer Martinez moved behind her and gently but firmly pulled Brenda's hands behind her back. The click of handcuffs closing seemed loud in the silent cabin. Brenda sobbed openly now, all pretense of dignity gone. As they turned her toward the aisle, preparing to escort her off the plane, applause began. It started with Miss Ruby, who stood up and clapped slowly and deliberately. Then Trevor joined in, then Kendra. Then row by row, the applause spread until most of the cabin was clapping, some even cheering. Justice, someone shouted. That's right. Protect our babies. Good riddance. Brenda was walked down the aisle in handcuffs, her head down, shoulders shaking with sobs, while passengers recorded every second of her humiliation. The video that would later go mega viral wasn't just of her kicking Elijah. It was this, a wealthy white woman facing the consequences of her actions, unable to buy or lie her way out of justice. As Brenda reached the front of the plane, Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit. He stood in full uniform, 4 stripes on his shoulders, meeting her eyes directly. On my aircraft, he said quietly, just loud enough for her and the people nearby to hear. Every soul matters equally. Remember that wherever you end up. Brenda looked at him, and something in his face, the righteous anger mixed with deep disappointment, made her look away in shame. She was escorted off the plane and into the waiting police vehicle. The moment she was gone, a different energy filled the cabin. A paramedic came on board, a young woman with gentle hands who examined Elijah while Naomi answered questions through her tears. Has going to be fine, the paramedic assured her after checking the baby over. It's definitely a bruise, and well documented with photographs for the police report, but there's no permanent damage. You did everything right, Mama. Those words broke something open in Naomi. She'd been holding herself together through sheer will. But hearing that validation, that acknowledgement that she was a good mother, that she'd done nothing wrong, released the dam. She wept while Miss Ruby held her, while strangers offered tissues and words of comfort, while Elijah dozed peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the drama had sparked. Officer Davis approached with a gentle smile. Mom, I know this has been traumatic, but I need to get a statement from you for our report. Are you up for that? Naomi nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I want her prosecuted. I want. Her voice broke. I just wanted to get to my mama. That's all. I just wanted to take care of my sick mother. And she acted like my baby and I were criminals for existing. I understand, Officer Davis said. And his eyes said, he really did understand. We're going to make sure justice is served. Can you walk me through everything that happened? As Naomi gave her statement, other passengers volunteered as witnesses. Trevor eagerly provided his video. Miss Ruby gave a detailed account of Brenda's behavior throughout the flight. Kendra offered to serve as a character witness, armed with documentation of Brenda's past discrimination. By the time the police were finished, they had an airtight case. Officer Martinez pulled Officer Davis aside. "This is more than just simple assault. Given her history and the racial element, we might be able to add a hate crime enhancement." Officer Davis nodded grimly. "Let's get all the evidence to the DA. This woman is going to face the full weight of the law." Meanwhile, at the station 5 miles away, Brenda sat in an interview room. Her hands no longer cuffed, but her wrists red from where the metal had pressed. She'd been allowed to call her husband, Theodore, who'd answered with ice in his voice. "What did you do, Brenda?" "I didn't mean to, Theo. The baby was crying for hours, and I was stressed, and I barely touched him, and now they're treating me like a monster. I just saw the video. Brenda, it's everywhere, millions of views. You deliberately kicked a baby." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" His voice hardened. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that. And you know what? I'm done. I've looked the other way for years while you made racist comments, while you discriminated against people, while you acted like you were better than everyone else. But this? Hurting a child? I can't defend this. I won't. Theo, please. I'm filing for divorce, Brenda. My lawyer will contact you." The line went dead. Brenda stared at the phone in her hand, her world crumbling. She'd lost her freedom, her reputation, her marriage, all in the span of 2 hours. And for what? Because she'd let her anger and prejudice override her humanity. Because she'd looked at a suffering baby and seen not a child in pain, but an inconvenience to be punished. A public defender entered the room, a tired-looking man who'd clearly drawn the short straw. "Miss Whitmore, I'm attorney Lawrence Hopkins. I've been assigned to represent you. I have to tell you, this case is challenging." "I didn't mean to hurt him," Brenda whispered. "Unfortunately, intent matters less than action in cases like this," Hopkins said. "The video shows premeditation. You looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then you acted. That's going to be very difficult to defend." "What am I looking at?" Hopkins consulted his notes. "Child assault, in the 3rd degree, at minimum. Given the circumstances and your prior history, the DA might pursue enhanced charges. You're looking at potentially 2 to 5 years in prison." Brenda's head dropped to her hands. Prison. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. How had it come to this? While Brenda sat in her cell, contemplating the ruins of her life, the story continued to explode across the internet. Within 6 hours of the incident, "White woman kicks black baby" was trending on every major social media platform. News outlets picked up the story. Cable news devoted entire segments to it. Everyone had an opinion. On a conservative news channel, a commentator argued that the airline had overreacted, that diverting an entire flight was excessive, that Brenda's rights had been violated. But even their call and viewers largely disagreed. "I'm as conservative as they come," one caller said, "but there's no defending kicking a baby. This isn't about politics. It's about basic human decency." On progressive networks, the story became a launching point for discussions about racism, about how black mothers are judged more harshly, about how black children are seen as less innocent, less deserving of protection. Sociologists and civil rights activists weighed in, using Brenda's case as an example of systemic prejudice. But the real impact was in the grassroots response. A GoFundMe for Naomi and Elijah was created by a complete stranger who'd seen the story and wanted to help. The goal was set at $5,000 to help with any medical expenses and to support Naomi while she took time off to care for her mother. Within 24 hours, it had raised over $300,000. The donations came with messages. "For every racist who tries to make you feel small, there are thousands of us who see your worth." Your son is beautiful and deserves all the love in the world. Thank you for being strong. You're an inspiration to mothers everywhere. Naomi, sitting in her mother's hospital room in Chicago after catching a rebooked flight, stared at her phone in disbelief. $300,000. She'd never seen that much money in her life. The financial stress that had been crushing her, the worry about medical bills and taking time off work, suddenly lifted. Her mother, Dorothy, weak but recovering from her stroke, squeezed her hand. "Baby, look at all that love, all those people standing with you." "I don't deserve this, Mama," Naomi whispered. "I didn't do anything special. I just tried to keep my baby safe." "That's exactly why you deserve it," Dorothy said. "Because in this world, being a black mother trying to keep her child safe sometimes takes more courage than anyone should need. But you did it, and people see that." Meanwhile, Brenda's world continued to collapse. Whitmore Properties issued a statement. "We are horrified by the actions of our former owner and are immediately severing all ties. Miss Whitmore has been removed from all positions of authority. Our company does not and will not tolerate racism or violence in any form." Her business partners voted unanimously to buy her out at the minimum legal price. Her clients canceled their contracts. Vendors refused to work with her. Within a week, the company's shed spent 20 years building had erased her completely. Her friends stopped returning calls. Her country club revoked her membership. Her church asked her to please worship elsewhere. Theodore followed through on his divorce threat, and the proceedings were brutal. He wasn't interested in reconciliation or even fair division of assets. He wanted distance from her toxicity. Sitting in her cell, awaiting trial, Brenda had nothing to do but think. And in those long hours, some of the defensive walls she'd built up began to crack. She thought about her childhood, about how she'd been bullied, about how that pain had twisted into anger and prejudice. She thought about the choices she'd made, the comments she'd dismissed as just jokes, the people she'd hurt with her discrimination. She thought about Elijah's face, that tiny, helpless baby. She'd kicked him, actually kicked him. A surge of nausea rose in her throat. What kind of person had she become? Her public defender brought her a stack of printed articles about the case. You should probably see what's being said. Brenda forced herself to read them. Story after story, op-ed after op-ed, all condemning her. But a few took a different approach, exploring the psychology of hate, the way hurt people, the cycle of pain and prejudice. Those articles made her cry, because they described her with an accuracy she couldn't deny. One article in particular struck her. It was written by a black psychologist who specialized in treating people who'd been radicalized by hate groups. She wrote, "Brenda Whitmore is a cautionary tale. Trauma doesn't excuse cruelty, but it often explains it. If we want to break the cycle of hatred, we have to address the wounds that create it, not just punish the symptoms." Brenda read that paragraph over and over. She'd been wounded, deeply. But instead of seeking healing, she'd let that wound fester and spread, infecting everyone around her. And now a baby bore the mark of her sickness. For the first time in her adult life, Brenda felt genuine remorse. Not self-pity, not anger at being caught, actual remorse for the pain she'd caused. She called her lawyer. "I want to plead guilty." Hopkins looked surprised. "Miss Whitmore, I strongly advise against that. We might be able to negotiate a lesser charge." "I'm guilty," Brenda said quietly. "I did what they said I did. I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to put that mother and her baby through a trial. I'm guilty, and I need to face the consequences." Hopkins studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll contact the DA's office. The news that Brenda had pleaded guilty sent another wave of discussion across social media. Some people saw it as a sign of genuine remorse. Others thought she was just trying to get a lighter sentence. The truth, as always, was more complicated. The DA, a no-nonsense black woman named Lillian Hayes, didn't offer any deals. She pleads guilty to all charges as filed, or we go to trial. Those are the options. Brenda agreed. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 months later, giving the judge time to review psychiatric evaluations, victim impact statements, and character references, or lack thereof. Those 3 months were the longest of Brenda's life. She underwent court-ordered psychological evaluation. The psychiatrist's report painted a picture of someone whose childhood trauma had created a fortress of defense mechanisms, including racial prejudice as a way of feeling superior when she'd been made to feel inferior. Miss Whitmore demonstrates capacity for change, the report concluded, but change will require years of intensive therapy and a willingness to confront deeply held beliefs. Brenda also received thousands of letters. Some were hate mail, people telling her she deserved to rot in prison. But others, surprisingly, were from people who'd also struggled with prejudice and worked to overcome it. They didn't excuse her actions, but they offered a roadmap for redemption if she was willing to walk it. One letter in particular moved her. It was from an older black woman who'd grown up during segregation. "My dear child," it read, "I watched them spit on me for the crime of wanting to go to school. I felt hatred in my heart for those who treated me as less than human. But I learned that hatred is a poison that destroys the vessel that contains it. You have a choice now. You can cling to your prejudice and die inside. Or you can do the hard work of becoming someone new. The path is painful, but it leads to life. Choose life." Brenda kept that letter, read it every night, let its words sink into the wounded places in her soul. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. Security had been tripled due to the high-profile nature of the case. News cameras lined the street outside. Protesters held signs, "Justice for Elijah," and "Protect Black Children." Inside, Judge Rosalind Monroe presided, a white woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. She'd reviewed every piece of evidence, every statement, every evaluation. Now she had to decide how to balance justice, punishment, and the possibility of redemption. Brenda entered the courtroom in a simple gray suit. Her hair pulled back, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her actions. Her lawyer sat beside her, but she'd asked him not to argue for leniency. She was here to accept whatever judgment came. The prosecutor presented the state's case, methodically laying out the evidence. The video was played one more time, and even months later, it had the power to shock. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Several people openly wept. "Your Honor," D.A. Hayes said, "this was not a moment of carelessness. This was a deliberate act of violence against one of our most vulnerable citizens." The defendant looked around to ensure she wasn't being watched, then kicked a baby, a 10-month-old infant. The bruise on Elijah Fletcher's leg took weeks to heal. The trauma to his mother's psyche may take much longer. Then came the victim impact statements. Naomi took the stand, Elijah now a year old, and sitting quietly with Dorothy in the gallery. Naomi had written her statement carefully, wanting to express the full weight of what had happened without letting anger consume her. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite her tears, "when Brenda Whitmore kicked my son, she didn't just hurt his body. She tried to tell us that we don't matter, that a baby's pain is less important than her comfort, that because my son is black, he doesn't deserve protection." Naomi paused, gathering herself. But here is what she didn't understand. "My son is loved. He is precious. He is wanted, and there are millions of people who stood up and said, "That baby matters. That mother matters. This cannot stand." She looked directly at Brenda for the first time. "I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I refuse to carry hatred in my heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. My son will never remember what you did to him, but I will. Every time I fly, he'll remember. Every time someone looks at us like we don't belong, he'll remember. You took something from us that day, and no sentence can give it back." She sat down, and there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Captain Jerome Mitchell was called next. "I've been flying for 30 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of human behavior at altitude, good and bad. But what I witnessed that day reminded me that racism isn't just about slurs or burning crosses. Sometimes it's about who we think deserves compassion and who doesn't." Miss Whitmore saw a black baby crying and decided he deserved punishment. I saw a vulnerable child and decided he deserved protection. That difference in perception is what we're really here to address. Then, surprisingly, the defense called Brenda herself to speak. Hopkins had advised against it, but Brenda insisted. She needed to say this. Needed it on the record. Brenda stood at the podium, her hands shaking. "Your Honor, I have no excuse for what I did. I was raised to believe that I was better than other people because of my skin color. That belief poisoned me. It made me cruel. It made me into someone who could hurt a baby and feel justified." Her voice broke. "I see it now. I see how twisted it'd become. I wish I could take it back. I wish I'd been the kind of person who smiled at that mother and asked if I could help. But I wasn't. I was the kind of person who kicked a baby." She looked toward the gallery, where Naomi sat. "Miss Fletcher, I am so deeply sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what I broke. Sorry doesn't take away your fear or your pain. But it's all I have to give. I'm sorry. And if you can forgive me, even though I don't deserve it, then maybe someday I can learn to forgive the people who hurt me and start breaking this cycle." She sat down, and the courtroom buzzed with reaction. Some people were moved. Others were skeptical. The judge's face remained impassive. Judge Monroe called for a 15-minute recess to review her notes. When she returned, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "Miss Whitmore, please rise," Judge Monroe said. Brenda stood, her whole body trembling. "I've presided over many cases in my career," the judge began. "Few have been as clear-cut as this one. You committed a violent act against a helpless infant. The video evidence is undeniable. The harm you caused is documented. And your history suggests this was not an isolated incident of poor judgment, but rather a pattern of discriminatory behavior." Brenda closed her eyes, waiting for the hammer to fall. "However," Judge Monroe continued, "I've also reviewed the psychiatric evaluation. I've read the letters you've received, and your responses to them. I've listened to your statement today, and I believe you're experiencing genuine remorse." The judge paused. "That doesn't absolve you, but it does inform my sentencing. You are hereby sentenced to 3 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. During your incarceration, you will participate in intensive therapy focusing on racial bias and anger management. Upon release, you will complete 500 hours of community service with organizations that support families of color." Brenda's knees nearly buckled. 3 years. It could have been worse, but it was still 3 years of her life. Furthermore, Judge Monroe said, "I'm ordering you to pay restitution to the Fletcher family in the amount of $50,000 for emotional distress and ongoing counseling needs." The judge looked directly at Brenda. "Miss Whitmore, you have been given a gift. The gift of consequence. The gift of time to reflect and change. The gift of a clear path forward. Don't waste it. Use these 3 years to become someone different, someone better, someone who wouldn't even recognize the person who kicked that baby. The gavel came down. Court was adjourned. As bailiffs led Brenda away, she looked back one more time at Naomi. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Naomi nodded once, a gesture that might have been acknowledgement, or closure, or just goodbye. Then Brenda was gone, through the door, beginning her 3-year journey toward, hopefully, redemption. 5 years later, the world had moved on to new outrages, new viral videos, new examples of humanity at its worst and best. But for those directly involved in what came to be known as the Flight 12 incident, the effects rippled outward in ways both expected and surprising. Naomi Fletcher had used the GoFundMe money wisely. Shed hired a full-time caregiver for her mother, allowing Dorothy to recover in comfort and dignity. Shed put the rest into a trust fund for Elijah's education. Shed also taken a 6-month sabbatical from work to focus on her own healing, attending therapy to process the trauma of that day. When she returned to nursing, she did so with renewed purpose. She specialized in pediatric care in underserved communities, spending extra time with Black mothers, offering them the compassion and support Shed needed that day on the plane. She became an advocate for families facing discrimination, speaking at conferences and community events about her experience. Elijah, now nearly 6 years old, had no memory of the incident. He was a happy, energetic kindergartner who loved dinosaurs and his grandmother's cooking. Naomi had decided not to burden him with the story until he was old enough to understand it. For now, he was just a kid, blissfully unaware that his infant experience had sparked a national conversation. Captain Jerome Mitchell had retired from commercial flying, though not because of any negative consequences from his decision. Quite the opposite. Had been offered a position as Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the airline, using his platform to implement new training programs for flight crews on recognizing and addressing discrimination. He gave speeches, wrote articles, became a voice for justice in the aviation industry. "What I did that day wasn't heroic," he often said in interviews. "It was basic human decency. The real question is why we've set the bar so low that protecting a baby is considered remarkable." Miss Ruby, the elderly woman who'd stood up for Naomi on the plane, became something of a celebrity in her community. She used her newfound platform to mentor young activists, teaching them that standing up for others didn't require youth or physical strength, just moral courage. Trevor, the college student who'd recorded the video, struggled initially with the attention his footage brought. He received death threats from people who thought had ruined Brenda's life, but he also received messages of gratitude from parents who felt seen and validated. He eventually wrote his senior thesis on the power and responsibility of citizen journalism in the age of smartphones. As for Brenda Whitmore, her 3 years in prison were transformative in ways she couldn't have imagined. The first year was hell. She was assaulted twice by other inmates who'd seen the video. She spent long stretches in solitary for her own protection. She contemplated suicide more than once, but slowly, through intensive therapy and an unexpected friendship with her cellmate, a Black woman named Keisha who was serving time for drug offenses, Brenda began the painful work of examining her beliefs. Keisha didn't coddle her or absolve her. Instead, she challenged her, questioned her, forced her to see the humanity Shed spent so long denying. "You think I want to be friends with someone who kicked a baby?" Keisha had said early on. "I got 3 kids of my own, but I also know hurt people, and I can see you're hurting. So either you gonna use this time to heal, or you gonna waste it feeling sorry for yourself. Your choice." Brenda chose to heal. She read books by Black authors, stories of pain and resilience that opened her eyes to experiences Shed willfully ignored. She attended every therapy session, every workshop, every opportunity for growth. She wrote letters of apology, not just to Naomi, but to every person of color Shed discriminated against in her business dealings. Every tenant Shed rejected. Every person Shed harmed with her prejudice. Most didn't respond. A few sent scathing replies, telling her exactly what they thought of her apologies. But a few, like that older black woman who'd written to her before trial, wrote back with encouragement. Keep walking the path. One letter said, redemption is possible if you're willing to do the work. When Brenda was released after 3 years with credit for good behavior, she emerged into a world that had largely forgotten her. Her bank accounts were frozen, her assets liquidated for restitution and court costs. She had the clothes on her back and a list of probation requirements. She lived in a halfway house, worked minimum wage jobs, and spent every spare moment on her court-ordered community service. She volunteered at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood, helping with after-school programs. The first few months were awkward. Parents were suspicious, rightfully so, but she showed up every day, did the work, asked for nothing in return. Slowly, grudgingly, some people began to thaw toward her. She'd never be fully trusted, never be fully forgiven. But she could be useful. She could serve, and in serving, she found something Shed never had before: genuine connection across racial lines, based not on her feeling superior, but on shared humanity. One day, 2 years after her release, Brenda was helping set up for a children's reading event at the community center when she looked up and froze. Naomi Fletcher stood in the doorway, Elijah holding her hand. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Then Naomi walked forward. Elijah ran ahead to join the other children, oblivious to the weight of this meeting. Miss Fletcher, Brenda said quietly, I didn't know you lived in this area. We moved here last year, Naomi said. My mother's nearby. I heard you volunteered here, but I needed to see for myself if the change was real. It is, Brenda said simply, or am trying to make it real. Every day. Naomi studied her. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple t-shirt. The carefully styled hair was natural, shot through with gray Shed, stopped bothering to color. The lines around her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and hard-won wisdom. I forgave you in that courtroom, Naomi said, but I didn't know if you'd actually change. Most people don't. I had to, Brenda said, her voice thick with emotion. Not because of the sentence, but because I couldn't live with who I'd been. Your son's face. It haunted me. Still does. Every time I see a child now, I think about how much pain my hatred caused. And I think about how much pain I was carrying around that made me capable of that. Naomi nodded slowly. Pain doesn't excuse cruelty, but understanding pain helps break the cycle. I'm trying to break it, Brenda said, for whatever that's worth. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Naomi said something that surprised them both. We have a mentor program here. Black and brown kids who need positive adult role models. You interested? Brenda's eyes widened. You'd trust me with children. I'd trust you to keep trying to be better. Naomi corrected. And maybe these kids need to see that people can change. That making mistakes, even terrible ones, doesn't have to be the end of your story. It wasn't forgiveness. Not quite. It wasn't friendship. But it was something more powerful. It was the possibility of redemption, earned through years of consistent effort and genuine transformation. As the children gathered for story time, Brenda sat in the circle next to Elijah, who smiled up at her without a trace of recognition or fear, just the open-hearted trust of a child. And for the first time in 5 years, Brenda felt something she thought Shed lost forever: hope. Captain Mitchell heard about Naomi and Brenda's encounter through the community center's director, who was so moved she called him specifically. He featured their story in his next diversity training session, using it as an example of how justice could include both accountability and the possibility of change. What happened on my flight that day was wrong, he told the roomful of airline employees. Brenda Whitmore's actions were indefensible. But if we believe in justice, we have to believe in more than just punishment. We have to believe in the possibility that people can learn, grow, and become better. That doesn't mean trusting blindly. It means creating space for demonstrated change. The training video ended with split-screen images. Elijah, laughing as he played, healthy and loved and thriving. And Brenda, quietly reading to a group of children, her face soft with concentration and care. 2 lives, forever, linked by a moment of cruelty, but not defined by it. As news of Brenda's transformation spread, she received another letter from the older black woman who'd first reached out. This time it said simply, "Well done, child. Now keep going. The work of becoming better is never finished." Brenda kept that letter pinned above her bed in her small apartment. On hard days, when the weight of her past threatened to crush her, when former acquaintances crossed the street to avoid her, when the easy path would be to blame others for her suffering, she read those words. Keep going. The work is never finished. And she did keep going. She finished her probation. She completed her community service hours, then volunteered more. She got her real estate license back. But instead of selling luxury properties, she worked to increase affordable housing in underserved areas. She donated 80% of her income to organizations fighting racial justice. Living simply in her studio apartment, she would never be who she was before. That woman, with her privilege and prejudice and carefully constructed life of superiority, was gone. In her place was someone smaller in the world's eyes, but larger in her soul. Someone who knew the cost of hatred and chose love instead. Someone who'd hit bottom and found solid ground. 10 years after the incident, Naomi published a book, Flight to Justice, a mother's story of pain, prejudice, and the power of forgiveness. In the final chapter, she wrote about encountering Brenda at the community center. I didn't forgive her because she changed. Naomi wrote, I forgave her to free myself, but I watched her change anyway. And that taught me something important. Healing isn't just for the victim. Sometimes the person who caused harm needs healing too. That doesn't absolve them. That doesn't erase the damage. But it does mean that our stories don't have to end in darkness. The book's final scene described a community event where Elijah, now 15, met Brenda for the first time, knowing who she was and what she'd done. Naomi had finally told him the full story, worried about how he'd react. Elijah looked at Brenda for a long moment. This white womanhood hurt him when he was too small to remember, too young to defend himself. Then he said, Mom says you're different now. I'm trying to be, Brenda said quietly. Good, Elijah said, because what you did was messed up. But I guess people can be messed up and still become better. That's what Mom teaches me. Then Head walked away to join his friends, leaving Brenda standing there with tears streaming down her face, struck by the grace of a black teenager who could have rightfully hated her but chose instead to acknowledge her humanity. As Naomi's book climbed the bestseller lists, she used her platform to talk about systemic racism, about implicit bias, about how we raise children to either see each other's humanity or to rank people by skin color. She became a sought-after speaker, her message resonating because she'd lived it, survived it, and found a way to move forward without being consumed by bitterness. Justice, she said in one particularly powerful TED Talk, isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. Restoring dignity to the victim. Restoring humanity to the perpetrator. Restoring a community torn by division. Captain Mitchell gave me justice that day when he diverted the flight. But lasting justice came from the years of work afterward, the rebuilding, the healing, the slow transformation of everyone involved. The video went viral, watched by millions, shared across platforms, used in schools and churches and community centers as a teaching tool. The comments section became a space for people to share their own stories of confronting bias, of seeking redemption, of choosing to break cycles of hate. One comment read, "My grandfather was a racist who said terrible things about black people my whole childhood. But after a heart attack, he was cared for by a black nurse who showed him kindness he didn't deserve. He changed in his final years. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. This story gives me hope that change is possible." Another, "I'm a black mother with a baby. This story makes me cry every time, but it also makes me feel less alone. Thank you for sharing your truth." And one more, "I used to be like Brenda. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was raised in hate. I'm trying to unlearn it." Stories like this help me believe I can. Captain Jerome Mitchell, now in his 70s, watched Naomi's TED Talk from his living room. His wife sat beside him, squeezing his hand. On his wall hung a framed letter from Naomi, thanking him for his courage that day, telling him that his decision had changed her life in ways beyond just that single moment. "You gave me something to believe in," the letter said. "You showed me that there are people who will stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. You showed my son, through your actions, if not your words, that his life has value. Thank you." Jerome had cried when he first read it, and his eyes misted over reading it again now. He thought about that day, about the split-second decision to divert the plane, about how easily he could have taken the easier path of just waiting until they landed in Chicago. But something in him had rebelled against allowing even one more minute of that woman's hatred to go unchallenged. "Do you think you'd do it again?" his wife asked, reading his thoughts, as she often did after 50 years of marriage. In a heartbeat, Jerome said, "Every time." As the screen faded to black on Naomi's talk, showing her and 15-year-old Elijah walking hand in hand, the final words appeared. "Justice is not a moment, it's a journey. And on that journey, we each have a choice, to repeat the cycles of pain that hurt us, or to break them and build something better." The flight was diverted, but the destination, for all of us, is healing. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this story? Have you ever witnessed racism, or stood up against injustice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or made you think differently about forgiveness and change, smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you believe that everyone deserves dignity, everyone deserves justice, and everyone deserves the chance to heal, then hit that subscribe button and join our community. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for believing that our world can be better. That our children can grow up in a place where the color of their skin doesn't determine how they're treated, where babies are protected, and where even those who've caused harm can find their way back to humanity. Until next time, treat each other with kindness, stand up for what's right, and remember, we're all on this flight together. Let's make sure everyone lands safely. This story reveals profound truths about our society. First, racism isn't always overt slurs or violence. Sometimes it manifests as deciding whose comfort matters more, whose children deserve compassion, whose humanity gets acknowledged. Brenda's actions stemmed from years of unchecked prejudice, showing how bias festers when left unexamined. Second, accountability matters. Captain Mitchell's decision to divert the plane sent a clear message. Actions have immediate consequences. We can't wait for convenient moments to address injustice. Every bystander who spoke up, every witness who recorded evidence, every person who refused to stay silent contributed to justice. Third, trauma doesn't excuse cruelty, but understanding its roots helps break cycles. Brenda's childhood pain twisted into hatred because she never addressed it. Healing requires confronting our wounds rather than inflicting them on others. Fourth, forgiveness is complex. Naomi's forgiveness didn't erase consequences or require trust. It freed her from carrying hatred while still demanding accountability. True forgiveness can coexist with justice. Finally, change is possible but requires genuine work. Brenda's transformation took years of uncomfortable self-examination, consistent action, and accepting that some bridges can never be fully rebuilt. Redemption isn't about returning to who you were, but becoming someone new. The most powerful lesson? We all choose daily whether to perpetuate harm or break cycles. Every interaction is an opportunity to see each other's humanity or deny it. Choose wisely. What's your take on this story? Do you think Captain Mitchell made the right decision to divert the entire flight? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered whether to speak up? Share your experiences in the comments below because your voice matters in this conversation. If you believe every child deserves protection regardless of their skin color, hit that like button right now. If this story made you think differently about justice, forgiveness, or the possibility of change, then you need to subscribe to this channel. We share real stories about real people facing extraordinary circumstances, stories that challenge us to be better. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Share it with parents who feel judged, with people working to overcome their own biases, with anyone who believes our world can be better than it is. Thank you for watching, for listening, for caring enough to make it to the end. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in justice, accountability, and the hard work of healing. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need them most. May you have the courage to stand up for what's right, the wisdom to recognize your own biases, and the grace to believe in transformation. Until next time, treat each other with dignity, protect the vulnerable, and remember that we're all in this together.